All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. We have an incredible, really incredible daf ahead of us. Say halacha, agarata, hashkafa, a little bit of everything in Meretz Hashem this morning. Begin by thanking our sponsor, our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Zechariah ben Zechariah and Dinah bas Rabdov, and Art and Sherry Miller, for dedicating the Sherman Drushos this month in loving memory of Art's brother Richard Miller, Reuven ben Betzalel v'Rachel. We hope that on the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in Necham. So with that, let us begin. Today's daf is daf test 9. We are picking up on Ches Amud Beis 8b. Let's just pick up again, if you don't mind. We're going to move back a little bit and just begin with Amar Ula, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 lines up in the bottom. We started this sugya already yesterday, but let's just dive back in. Amar Ula, Amar Reish Lakish. Ula says, Rabbi says as follows. Reish Lakish says, Hifrish eser behemos lechagigah. So, if a person set aside 10 chagigah animals, remember again we're talking about over here, shalmei chagigah, right? Shalmei chagigah. Person separated out 10 shalmei chagigah. And what happened? Hikriv chamish b'yam tavisha. So we'll say, let's say you offered up 5 on the first day. Chozer umakriv chamish b'yam tav sheni. You can go ahead and offer up the remaining 5 on the second day of Yom Tiv. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no. Kevan shepasak shuvin amakriv. Rabbi Yochanan on the other hand said, no, that's not the halacha. Whatever you offered up on day number 1 is what you offered up. And once you stopped offering up shamei chagigah, you cannot continue. You cannot continue. And I will say, what's the issue over here? The concern that Rashi seems to highlight is that halacha lemaisa, there's an issue of Baal Tosef. I mentioned this yesterday. Baal Tosef means you're not allowed to add on to the mitzvahs. We already learned that the pasuk says v'chagosem oso. You shall go ahead and celebrate on it. On it tells us that the Karban Chagigah is offered up on the first day of Yom Tiv. So therefore, working backwards, Rabbi Yochanan says, whatever you offered up on day number 1, that's what you offered up. And if you go ahead and offer up more Chagigahs on day number 2, that's called Baal Tosef. That's called Baal Tosef. That's called adding on to mitzvahs, and one is not allowed to do that. Reish Lakish, on the other hand, seems to feel unconcerned and seems to feel that halacha lamaisa there's no issue of Baal Tosef. So let's delve into this machlokis a little bit. Very exciting. So it says say a person set aside these 10 animals for chagigas, and halacha lamaisa he did not articulate anything. That's the Gemara saying, if you didn't articulate anything, that's where whatever you offered up on day 1, you offered up, and anything left over cannot be offered up. Now, when we say cannot be offered up, it means cannot be offered up as a Karban Chagigah. On the other hand, kan b'mefaresh, we'll say, now this is actually very interesting. If a person explicitly said that I'm setting aside 10 Chagigah animals to offer up on the first day of Yom Tiv, a person said those words. And now let's say what happened. You offered up 5. You could offer up the remaining 5 on day number 2. Why? There's no issue of Baal Tosef. Why is there no issue of Baal Tosef? Because since I explicitly said that I'm setting aside these animals to be left to be offered on day number 1, whatever is left over and offered on day number 2 is viewed as a tashlumin, as a makeup for day number 1. So I'll say, see here the distinction, a very important distinction. If you just set aside, actually this is Rabbi Abba suggesting, if you just set aside 10 animals for Karban Chagigah, you don't say anything. So whatever you offer up on day 1, that's what you offer up. You can't offer up anything else on day 2. Concern of Baal Tosef. However, if halacha lemaisa, I set aside 10 animals, and I say I'm offering up these animals on day number 1, whatever, and then I have left over, I could offer up the rest on day number 2. It's not Baal Tosef. because day 2 is viewed as a makeup, a tashlumin for day number 1. That's Rabbi Abba's suggestion. So the Gemara says, well, let's analyze this. Hi stam hechi dami. Let's talk about the case where you don't explicitly say anything. Let's talk about this. So the Gemara says, what's the case? So we'll say, if you want to say it's a case where I didn't say anything. In other words, I didn't say that I'm separating out the Chagigahs for day number 1. I just didn't say anything. So I'll say, so what's the case? If I'm offering up Karban Chagigahs and I just simply run out of time, Rabbi said that it's circumstantially clear that the reason I didn't finish offering up the Karban Chagigahs is why? Why? I ran out of time. So if I ran out of time, I will say I really should be able to go ahead and offer up the rest of the Karbanos on day number 2, because in that case, it's clear that day number 2 is a tashlum and a makeup for day number 1. Ve'ela de lesle ochlin. Okay, so maybe it's a case where the reason I didn't offer up the rest of the Chagigahs is why? I don't have enough people to consume all of the meat. Well, if that's the case, then I will say it's clear the reason I didn't offer up the Chagigahs is because I don't have people to consume the meat. If that's the case, then perhaps it should be permitted to go ahead and offer it up on day number 2 as well. To which the Gemara says, Lo tzricha di'ika shos bayom ve'isle ochlin midikalo akravinu shma mina shir sharinus. Therefore, I will say the Gemara says you're right. The case has to be as follows. The case of Stam Rabosai is the following case. I separate out 10 karbanos for Chagigah, and what happens? I offer up 5. Now the case is where there's more than enough time to what? Offer up the remaining 5. And there's also more than enough mouths to feed, right? There's more than enough people to eat. So in a case like that, where you didn't explicitly say that these karbanos are for day 1, and there's enough time to offer up all of the karbanos, and there's enough people to eat all of the meat, right? In that kind of case, where you leave over the karbanos for day number 2 for no good reason, then Allah you can't offer up the rest of them on day number 2, because that's going to look like Bal Tosif. Says the Gemara. This seems to be clear. The Gemara says, when Rabbi came to Rabbi Yochanan the following, Hifrish eser behemos lechagigah. So if a person separated out 10 animals, first Karban Chagigah, Hikriv chamish b'yom tov rishon, person offered up 5 of them on the first day of Yom Tiv, Chozer umakriv chamish b'yom tiv sheni. You could offer up the remaining 5 on day number 2. Kashana hadadi. But that poses a contradiction. We just said before that if you separate out 10 Chagigahs and what? You only offered up 5. You cannot offer up the remaining 5 on day number 2. How do you reconcile it? Not a shayla. Elaf shmamina. Kan bistam kan b'mafaresh shmamina. Therefore, I will say we keep reverting back to the same distinction of stam versus mefarish. So I will say, so once again, the distinction that the Gemara is focusing on is as follows. If I separate out 10 Chagigahs, so I'll say again, let's keep with the simple case. The simple case is I separate out 10 Chagigahs and I say my intention is to offer up all of these karbanos on day number 1. And for some reason, we're going to discuss the reason, I only offer up some of them on day number 1. What can I do with the rest? Offer them up on day number 2. Because in this case, because I explicitly set them aside to be offered up on day number 1, anything left over for day number 2 is not considered to be Bal Tosif, but rather it's considered to be a Tashlumin. Day number 2 is a makeup for day number 1. Whereas if I just go ahead and separate out 10 karbanos for a Chagigah, and I don't say anything, and I only offer up 5 on day number 1. By the way, 5 it doesn't matter 5. It could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 9. The point is I left something over for day number 2, right? And assuming there was enough time to offer up everything, and there were enough people to go ahead and eat the meat, if I leave over, I can't offer up that Karban Chagigah on day number 2, for that is considered to be Bal Tosif. Itmar nami amar Shambar Abba amar Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi top of test lo shanu ela shelo gamar. So I will say, listen to this. We only learn that this applies when you didn't finish. In other words, I will say, we only learned that halacha l'maisa, you can't offer up the Chagigah in number 2 when you didn't finish. Aval gamar chozer umakriv. But if you finished, you could go ahead and continue to offer. So we'll say, the Gemara says, my gamar. What does that mean, gamar? What does that mean? So it says the Gemara, listen to this, ilema gamar karbonosav. If you say that it means you finished your karbanos, so my makrib, then what is there to go ahead and offer up? Ella shelo gamar hayom. Rather, it means that what? That halacha l'maisa, the day didn't finish. Aval Gomer Hayom, but we'll say if you ran out of time, then ultimately Choser Makriv. So we'll say this is another very important distinction. In other words, Halacha L'maisa, there are essentially two ways. It sounds like from the Gemara, two ways that you could offer up remaining Chagigos on day number 2. What are the two ways? Either you explicitly said that what? You explicitly said that, again, everything is for day number 1, right? Or it sounds like over here that halacha l'maisa, if it was an ones. Ones means what? You just ran out of time. It's a lot to offer up 10 karbanos. So maybe you just went ahead and ran out of time, and that's why you didn't offer it up. So we'll say, so how do we paskin halacha l'maisa? So we'll say, so listen to this. So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Chagigah, Perek Beis Halacha Zayin. Listen to this. Hifrish eser behemos lachagigaso, vehikrif mehen miksasim berishon upasak. So I'll say, so listen to this. Person separated out 10 chagigas. I'll say, when she asked me yesterday after the shir, why would a person separate out 10 chagigas? Right? Because remember, again, you could also separate out shamei simcha. Right? And I remember we also saw in yesterday's daf that there are so many, there are financial advantages. So I tried to look around. I could not find the compelling reason as to why. Hey, somebody did chagigas, whatever. Maybe a person likes carbon chagiga. Couldn't find the compelling reason why you would separate out 10 chagigas, unless of course maybe a person is offering them up on behalf of a number of individuals. That's the other possibility. Then maybe they're not all my karbanos, right? Maybe I'm representing a chevra. Possible, but from an individual perspective, why somebody would offer up multiple chagigos instead of utilizing shalmei simcha, where for shalmei simcha, remember again as we saw in yesterday's daf, you could use pretty much any kind of money. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. And so the Rambam writes as follows. The Rambam says, a person separated out 10 animals for a chagigah. Here's our case. V'hekriv mehen miktsasam rishon. So you offered up some of them on the first day of Yom Tiv, upasak. And then you stopped. So there's leftover chagigas. Shuv eino chozer umakriv ashar shaharishir osam. So the Rambam paskins, whatever you left over to day number 2, you cannot offer up as a carbon chagiga. Ve'im lo pasak ela dochko hayom. I will say, but if, let's say, it's not the pshat that you just stopped, but rather what? You ran out of time. The day ended. You could offer up the rest tomorrow. So we'll say, I just want to point out over here, the Rambam does not really get into the distinction between stam and mefarish. According to the Rambam, what's it all about? It's all about if you ran out of time. Right? If you have enough time to offer up all of the chagigas and you don't do so, whatever you offered. Whatever you didn't offer cannot be offered up as a chagiga the next day. But if you're offering up chagigas and you simply run out of time, halacha l'maisa, the Rambam says whatever is left over can be offered up the next day. Incredible. We'll say that's the halacha l'maisa. We'll say now we come to a beautiful, beautiful Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Mishalo chag b'yom tov rishon shel chag, chogigas kol haregel b'yom tov achron shel chag. So we'll say, now listen to this. What happens if a person didn't go ahead and offer up their chagiga? So we'll say, in this case over here, we're going to see there was some reason why I didn't offer up my chagiga on the first day of Yom Tiv. Now this Mishnah is framing this by Sukkis. So if I didn't offer up my chagiga on the first day of Sukkis, not a problem. You can bring your chagiga over the course of the entirety of Sukkis. We'll say, I just want to point out, this is different than our previous case. The case we were just dealing with is what happened. What happened in our case? I offered chagigas on day 1, right? I separated a whole bunch of chagigas. And simply, again, I have leftover chagigas, right? I have leftover chagigas. So now the shaila is, what can I do with the leftover chagigas? That's different than our case over here. This case is, I didn't offer any chagiga on day number 1. So the Mishnah says, if for some reason you missed out on day number 1, you can always go ahead and offer it up over the course of the rest of Yom Tiv. Furthermore, Yom Tov ha'achron shel chag. And I will say, this is why it's good to illustrate this by Sukkis. You can even make up your chagiga when? Shmini Atzeres. And I will say, what's the chiddush in that? What's the chiddush? Even though Shmini Atzeres is a regel b'fnei atzmos, it's only supposed to remember again, a little chazara by Sukkis. Shmini Atzeres is regel b'fnei atzmos. Remember again, 6 things. Pizar kishav, right? Pizar kishav, excellent. Pizar kishav. So I will say, you might have thought that Shmini Atzeres, there's no makeup. No, even if you forgot your Chagigah over the course, ultimately, of the entire Yom, you can make it up on Shmini Atzeres. So, Avar Haraga V'lo Chag, we'll say, watch this, what a profound statement in the Mishnah. What happens if all of Yom Tov went by, Sukkot went by, Shmini Atzeres went by, and I never offered up the Chagigah? Eino Chayev Ba'achriyusa. I will say, there's no makeup, right? You're not. I will say, now when you read that statement, Eino Chayev Ba'achriyusa, how does it make you feel? At first glance, it makes you feel good, right? I have no responsibility. I have no responsibility. Okay, look at the next line of the Mishnah. Al Zeh Ne'emar, about this Shlomo HaMelech said in Koheles, Mu'uvas lo yuchal liskon, that which is crooked cannot be fixed. The chesron lo yuchal lihimanos, and that which is missing cannot be counted. See, I will say, lest you think that Eino Chayev Ba'achriyuso makes you feel good. Oh, I have no ongoing responsibility for this. True, you have no ongoing responsibility. You know why? Because the sacrificial ship has sailed. Right? At the end of the day, I've lost the opportunity. And what Shlomo HaMelech teaches us, which is such a profound yesod, both says that there are some opportunities in life that if you let them slip through your fingers, when you decide to wake up, maybe they'll still be there. But more often than not, when you let opportunity go, and you let it slip through your fingers, and then I decide to wake up at some point in time, more often than not, when I wake up and I want the opportunity has already moved on. Mu'uvas lo yuchal liskon. I will say there are some things in life that we break that cannot be made whole. Some things in life that are crooked that cannot be fixed. There's a number of lessons embedded in this. So I will say, which is, see, it's actually interesting. This drush is not focusing on that first part of the pasuk. The drush is really focusing on the second part of the pasuk. The chesron lo yuchal lihimanos, that which is missing cannot be counted. Which means you missed your opportunity. It's gone. It's gone. The first part of the pasuk is talking about something a little bit different, which is not every mistake is fixable. Which is an overwhelming yesod in life that we all learn over the course of the journey in life. A lot of things are fixable, but there are many things we do in life that can simply not be undone. So the Gemara goes, the Mishnah goes, Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Eizuhu muvas shaluch yuchalisakin. Both say, what's it, or both say, what's an example of something that is crooked, that cannot be straightened, or something that is broken, that cannot be fixed? So he gives an extreme example. All right, so it's a pretty extreme example. A man who has an illicit relationship and fathers a mamzer. See, I will say, once you father a mamzer, there's no undoing that act. In other words, the Gemara is going to discuss sometimes even an act itself of illicit relations can't be undone. We'll discuss that. But Lamaisa, what it's saying over here is that sometimes there are results that I create through my negative activities. And even though I'm about tshuva, right, I want to do better. I realize the error of my ways. I want to live differently. I want to do better. I can't walk it back. I will say it's one of the most humbling things in life that we all encounter. I mean, hopefully not the mamzer part, but I will say, but you know, but there are other things in life that we encounter that I do something wrong. I make a serious mistake, and I realize it. And I own it, and I want to do tshuva for it. And as an individual, like between myself and Hashem, I can do tshuva for it. But I've created my realities in my life that I can't undo. I can't undo them, no matter how sorry I am. This is what it is. These are the realities. I'm saying it's an overwhelming thing because so much of who we are is focused on the concept of tshuva, that no matter what corner I back myself into, I can get myself out of it. That's the power of tshuva, and that is true. That is absolutely true. But lamaisa, at the end of the day, there are some things you can't undo. There are some realities that simply cannot be undone. There are some results that you just simply cannot walk back. So the Mishnah goes on. Im tomar begoni v'gozel, because if you think that it's talking about someone who steals, right, geneva, gizela, both say different types of theft, the truth is that can be undone. How so? Rabbi say you can remedy if you steal something from someone, right? I could walk that back, right? I could return the stolen object, and even if the object is no longer extant, I could pay back money. Rabbi Shimon Yochai Omer, ein korin mu'uvas ela lamishu hayu metukad betchila. Rabbi say, listen to this. So it's interesting. It says, remember, Shalom Melech says, something that is crooked cannot be made straight. So Rashbi says, is incredible. We saw Rashbi last night in our Chassidus Chabura, in our Chalban Chabura. So Rashbi says, Reuven Yochai says, you can't call something crooked if it wasn't initially straight. Right? So in other words, like the state of crookedness really only impacts something that was at first straight. Right? At first it was fixed. In other words, you can't be broken. You can't be broken if you were never in a fixed state. It's actually very profound. He says, so you're only called crooked if first you were straight and then became crooked. So who does that refer to? I will say, who is the person who becomes crooked? Who is the person who becomes crooked? The Talmud Chacham. In other words, I will say, first I have to be straight. First I have to be straight. Who's the person who's straight? That's the Talmud Chacham. That's the Talmud Chacham. So I will say, so Shlomo is referring to a person who was first in a state of what we'll call straightness, right? Of fixedness, right? He was ultimately matukan. He was matukan. And then ultimately, again, then he veered, did something that unfortunately has irreversible results. See, I'll say, what I want to be clear is, in the world of tshuva, there aren't necessarily irreversible consequences, right? Because tshuva could help me with the consequences of my act. But what the Mishnah is trying to highlight over here is there are such things as irreversible results, right? In other words, I can't undo certain results. A man has an illicit relationship and fathers a mamzer, that is an irreversible result. The consequences of that, my personal consequences, maybe I could work out with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Rashbi says, and this is really fascinating, Rashbi says the pasuk itself only applies to someone who started life in a straight state, right? In a matukan state, and then went ahead and did something wrong. But if a person was always broken, I will say it's an incredible yesod, because sometimes people do things in life and we get very upset at them, or what they do is incredibly hurtful. And sometimes it's important to understand there are people in life who have always been broken. They've always been broken. That could be a result of the home that they were brought up in. That could be a result of just a series of bad life decisions. They've always been broken. And sometimes when a person has always been broken, it's hard to expect them to make proper decisions. It's hard to expect them. So this is incredibly, so Rashbi says, sometimes in life there's only a real expectation of doing the right thing and doing good thing. If you have a frame of reference for that, you have a context for that. But if you've been broken your whole life, a person's been broken their whole life, ultimately, again, what else do they know but broken decisions? We'll get into this more. Says the Gemara. Both say, so back to the beginning of the Mishnah. So Minhani Mili, from where do we know this? And also, from how do we know what? From how do we know that halacha l'maisa, if you did not offer your Chagigah on day number 1, that's what? You have the opportunity to offer it over the course of Yom Tiv. How do we know that? So Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishun Rabbi Shmuel, Ne'emar atzeres b'shvi'i shal Pesach, v'ne'emar atzeres b'shmini shal Chag. It says the word atzeres on the 7th day of Pesach, and it says Atzeres on the 8th day of Yom Tiv, 8th day of Sukkot. And we'll say, of course, 8th day, there is no 8th day of Sukkot. It says Atzeres on Shmini Atzeres. But it calls it the 8th day of Sukkot. Ma'ala halan l'tashlumin. And we'll say, just like the Torah says Atzeres by the 7th day of Pesach, to highlight the idea that the 7th day of Pesach is still Yom Tiv. And therefore, for some reason, you didn't offer up your Chagigah over the course of Pesach, you can still go ahead and offer it up when? On the 7th day of Pesach. So to Afkan l'tashlumin. So too by Sukkot, by Shmini Atzeres, if you did not offer up your carbon over your Chagigah over the course of Sukkot, you could offer it up through the Yom Tiv, even onto Shmini Atzeres. So the Gemara said Mufne. I will say now the lashon of Mufne means as follows. Remember, in order to make a Gzer, right? Gzer Shava 101, right? Gzer Shava 101, we know. Then what's a Gzer Shava? What's a Gzer Shava? I find the same word in 2 different places, and that allows me to create a halachic bridge between 2 different topics. Well, in order to be able to do that, the word that is used for the Gzer Shava must be mufna, must be open. In other words, unused for any other drashas. So the Gemara says, is the word atzeres mufna? Is it open and available for other drashas? To which the Gemara says, mufna, the ilav mufna, because if the word atzeres is not mufna, I can ask a kasha on this Gzer Shava. Ikula Mifrach. What's the pircha? Ma l'shvi'i shal Pesach shekin enu chalak it's understandable that the seventh day of Pesach can be used for Tashlumin to make up the Chagigah. Why? Because the seventh day of Pesach is the same as the sixth, the same as the fifth, the same as the fourth, the third, the second, and the first. All the days of Pesach are sacrificially the same. Right? So therefore, I will say again, it makes sense that you can, or I should say, they're at least sacrificially common. So therefore, again, it makes sense you can make up for the Chagigah on day number 7. However, so the Gemara says, Masha'en kain, Tomar b'shmini shalchag shechaluk milefanov. But I will say, ultimately, again, Shmini Atzeres, remember again, has a fundamentally different sacrificial order than the days before it. Remember again, on Shmini Atzeres, you're only bringing one par. So I will say, so again, therefore, loi afnuye mufna. Ultimately, again, that's why we have to make sure that the word Atzeres is indeed open for this drasha, because if the word Atzeres is not open, then halacha l'maisa, I could demolish this Gzeir Shava with this pircha, with this question. To which the Gemara says, Michti, my Atzeres, what does Atzeres mean? Atzor ba'asiyas melacha. The pasuk says, remember, what does Atzeres mean? Atzeres means stop. Right? It's interesting. Like you often translate Atzeres as like a holy assembly. But the truth is, the word Atzeres really means atzur, to stop. It means Atzeres means a day in which I don't do malacha. But why do I need the Torah to say that? Haksiv lo sasem malacha. Torah already says don't do malacha. So why do I need Atzeres also? Atzeres the kas of Rahmana Lamali. So I'll say, why do I need the word Atzeres? Rather, Rabbi say, what do you see? That the word Atzeres is extra. That Rabbi say, the beautiful part is there are no extra words in the Torah. In other words, it's extra that I don't need it to teach me the stated context. In other words, I don't need Atzeres to teach me that I can't do malacha on Shmini Atzeres. Why don't I need it? Because the Torah already explicitly says, Lo sasa malacha, don't do malacha. So therefore, I will say the Atzeres word is open, it's mufna, it's quote unquote extra. And therefore, because it's not needed to darshan anything for Shmini Atzeres itself, it's able to create the Gzeir Shava with the 7th day of Pesach and to teach you the following halacha. Just like the 7th day of Pesach could be a makeup day if you didn't offer up the Chagigah up until that point in time, so too Shmini Atzeres could be a makeup date to offer up the Chagigah of Sukkot if you have not brought it until that point in time. But Tano, my sinem mehacha. The Bible says our Tana learns it from a different place. Tisanyo v'chagosim also chag laHashem shivas yomim. The pasuk says, right, you will go ahead and celebrate it as a chag laHashem for 7 days. So we'll say, watch this. Yochol yehei chogeg v'holech kol shiva. You might have thought that halacha l'maisa, you have to bring a Chagigah all 7 days. We'll say maybe that's what it means. That we already spoke about this a little bit. You might have thought that halacha l'maisa, the Chagigah has to be brought all 7 days. Talmud lomar oso. Therefore, the pasuk says on it, oso ata chogeg v'ata chogeg kol shiva. You only have to observe the first day with Chagigah, but you need not bring a Chagigah all 7 days. Imkein lama nemar shiva. If that's the case, I will say, here's what's interesting. I will say, you hear the problem? The pasuk says v'chagosem oso chag laHashem Shivas Yamim. You shall celebrate it with a carbon Chagigah for 7 days. So we'll say, Pasha Pshat, we think that means you have to bring a Chagigah all 7 days. Any single time you show up in the base of me, you got to bring a Chagigah. To which the Gemara says, no. It says, V'chagosem oso. You'll bring the Chagigah oso on it. On it refers to what? First day Yom Tiv. So what do I do with Shivas Yamim? What do I do with that? Shivas Yamim teaches me what? Tashlumin. That halacha l'maisa, if I don't go ahead and bring the carbon on the first day of Pesach, I what? Bring it over the 7 days. So I'll say, I'm just pointing out over here, they're just different drushes to get to the same conclusion, right? The conclusion everyone agrees with, which is, if you for some reason didn't get to bring your Chagigah on day number 1, then the halacha is, you can bring it over the course of Yom Tiv, right? You can bring it anytime over the course of the 8 days or 7 days, 8 days of Yom Tiv. Again, do I learn that out from Chagosim, also Shivas Yamim, or Atzeres, Gzeir Shava? That's a machlokes. So we'll say, so that's Pesach. That's Pesach. How do I know about Sukkot? That if I did not offer up the Chagigah on the first day of Yom Tiv, that I could go ahead and offer up the Chagigah the rest of Sukkot and even on Shmini Atzeres. Talmud lomar b'chodesh hashvi tachogu. The pasuk says in the 7th month you shall bring the Chagigah. So we'll say, Tachogu also. So we'll say, now listen to this. Now remember, Sukkot is in the 7th month. So we'll say, what does that mean? That I can bring the Chagigah the entire 7th, remember Tishrei is the 7th month, that I can bring the Chagigah the entire 7th month. Talmud Lomar, also. Therefore, the pasuk says, "V'chagosem also." Once again, by Chodesh Hashvi tachogu also. Also ata chogeg v'ata chogeg chutzah. That means you could go ahead and bring the Chagigah on Yom Tiv, right? On the Yom Tiv of Sukkot, teaches me Tashlumin by Sukkot. So according to this approach, it's interesting. The first Madda Amar uses the Gzeir Shava of Atzeres Atzeres. Now, both say the beauty of Atzeres Atzeres is it's one limud that brings in both Pesach and Shavuos. Obviously, who's missing from the party over here? That's right, Pesach and Sukkot, I said it. And who's missing from the party? Right, Shavuos. That's not a problem because once you find this by TORAH Galam, obviously whatever applies to 2 is going to apply by the 3rd as well. So we'll say, so again, one drasha just has Atzeres, other drashas has a separate drasha for Pesach and for Sukkot. Good, but everyone arriving at the same conclusion, which is, you offer up your Chagigah on day number 1. If you fail to do so on day number 1, you can make it up over the course of the year. I will say, so now watch this. This is really fascinating. Umay tashlumin. So I will say, what does this mean? I will say, we actually saw this at the beginning of the Masechta. We actually saw this alluded to on Daf Beis. It's very exciting. So I will say, so listen to this. Umay tashlumin. So I will say, when we say you can make up for the Chagigah, what are the mechanics of the makeup? So I will say, here's, and this is where kind of this sugya and the previous sugya kind of collide. What's clear to note over here is that the Chagigah is a function of the first day of Yom Tiv. So once I know that, what's the mechanism for makeup? Right? What's the mechanism for making it up on a day other than day number 1? So watch this. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Tashlumin Derishon. Rabbi Yochanan says it's very simple. In other words, if you can't offer it up or didn't offer it up on day number 1, so the subsequent days of Yom Tiv have the ability to be a makeup for day number 1. But I will say, but everything is about day number 1. It's just if I don't offer it up on day number 1, I could offer it up on day 2. But it's not really the pshat that I'm offering up on day 2. I'm offering up on day 2 as what? As a makeup for day number 1. Everything is tethered back to day number 1. Rabbi Oshia Amar Tashlumin Zelazeh. Rabbi Oshia says no. Essentially, I will say what happens is as follows. If you don't offer it up on day number 1, what effectively happens? The obligation transfers to day 2. But once that happens, there's no longer a day number 1 obligation. In other words, it's transferred. So I will say, this is a fundamental machlokes. Do we say that when you miss day number 1, so ultimately the obligation is transferred to day number 2? Right? It's literally transferred. That's Rabbi Oshia. Tashlum and Zelazeh. Or no, there's not a transfer. Everything has the ability to be a makeup for day number 1. But the obligation is rooted in day number 1. Now, you'll say to yourself, I don't know, it sounds like the same thing. Right? What does it matter? Either way, practically, I'm able to make it up on subsequent days. Watch this. My bad, I was looking where it says, Nusa, what's the nafkamina? What's the nafkamina? I'm Rabbi Zera, watch this. Well, remember, we learned this. Chiger biyom rishon, then it's pashe biyom sheni ikabinah. Wow. But it's such a fascinating case. Here's the difference. What happens if a person was crippled on day number 1 and Baruch Hashem was healed on day number 2? Right? So we'll say, now when we say crippled sounds very dramatic. The idea is, I couldn't walk on day number 1. We'll say, now what happens if you can't walk on day number 1? What's the halacha if you can't walk? You're parted from Re'iyah. So in this case over here, I could not walk on day number 1, but Baruch Hashem, by day number 2, I was healed. So we'll say, now what's the shayla? Do I have, right? Not like an evangelical, I was healed. Not like that one, right? So I'll say, so again, halacha l'maisa now, am I obligated in Chagigah on day number 2? So I'll say, watch this. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Tashlumin Derishon. So let's talk this out. So Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the makeup on subsequent days is already rooted in day number 1. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you are not chayiv on day number 1, then what? As they say, ein alamat lidaber. There's nothing more to talk about. You're not chayiv. Because the entire obligation for Chagigah stems from day number 1. So if I was not chayiv on the root, at day number 1, the fact that I can walk now on day number 2, good for me, but I'm not chayiv in Chagigah. So Rabbi Yochanan Tashlumin Rishon, Kevan de lo chazi b'rishon lo chazi b'sheni. Since I was not obligated on day number 1, I have no further obligation on day number 2. Rabbi Oshia Amar Tashlumin Zelazeh. Rabbi Oshia says that in fact, again, each day is a makeup for the other, and therefore, according to Rabbi Oshia, even though I was not chayiv on day number 1, the obligation transfers to day number 2. And now that halacha l'maisa, again, I can walk on day number 2, I am obligated. So I will say a profound and powerful nafkamina for a person who is literally exempt on day 1, but becomes obligated on day 2. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you're out. Once you're exempt on day number 1, you are exempt for the rest of Yom Tov. According to Rabbi Ushia, no, the obligation transfers. So even though I was exempt on day 1, if I'm able to do it on day number 2, I'm going to be chayiv. So says the Gemara as follows: Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this? Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this? Now, what's the problem? Watch this. But an interesting case. Nitma bayom maybe balayla. Maybe, sorry. So I'll say here's the case. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Nitma bayom. We're going to do this quickly. Rashi says, "Bekrisos tnan nazir maybe carbon echad akol tumas harbe." Bamar Chizkiya nitma bayom ches. So I'll say here's the case. I have a nazir who became tamei. Right? So what happens if a nazir becomes tamei? He observes again. Let's say he comes in contact with a corpse. Right? He becomes tamei. He observes a 7-day duration of Tara. So now what happens? So the Nazir, we'll say, so if you have a situation of a Nazir who encounters repeated periods of Tumah. So look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, V'amr Chizkiya, Nitma biyom ches, shu ro'i lahavi karbanos, lahaschel miyin ezirusav. The Yamim Shemana Kodem Tumah Batin. So we'll say, listen to this. You have a Nazir who observed 7 days of Tara. Right, so he went to the mikvah. Remember again, now he's had Herav Shemesh. On day 8, he's going to bring his karbanos. So here's the case. The case is Nitma Bayom. So we'll say now, let's say on day 8, he becomes Tameh again. So we'll say, so now he's going to have to go through another period of Tara. But what's the halacha? Maybe. I will say, now here's the case. The case is he became Tameh again on day number 8 before he had the opportunity to bring his karbanos for his first tumah. Now he's going to go ahead and go through the process of his second tumah. When he gets through the process of his second tumah, Rabbi say, what's the shaila? How many sets of karbanos does he have to bring? So Chizkiah says as follows. Chizkiah says, well, if he became tamei on day 8, that means the obligation for the karbanos for the first tumah devolved upon him already. So when he becomes tahar after the second tumah, he's going to have to bring what? 2 sets of karbanos, right? One for the first tumah, one for the second tumah. Pretty straightforward. Balayla eno mevi. Conversely, let's say the Nazir who became tamei, now became tar. So he observed 7 days. He went to the mikvah on day number 7. On night 8, he becomes tamei again. So he's going to have to observe another period of tara. But Chizkiah says when he becomes tar, he's only going to have to bring what? 1 set of karbanos, right? For the second tumah, but not for the first. Why? Because since he became tamei before day 8, when he could have brought the karbanos, therefore again he's not chayiv karbanos for the first tumah, only chayiv karbanos for the second tumah. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Af balayla nami maybe. Rabbi Yochanan says no, not true. Even if he becomes tamei on night 8, after he undergoes his second tara process, he's going to have to bring 2 sets of karbanos, right? 1 for his second tumah and 1 for his first tumah. Now look at Rashi. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Ho'il v'tava l'tumaso rishona. Since on day number 7 he already immersed for his first tumah, v'heriv shmasho, and the sun set, nischayiv b'karban. See, Rabbi Yochanan says as follows. Once night number 8 comes, the Nazir is already chayiv in his karbanos for tumah, or for tara in this case. He's already chayiv in his karbanos. Now I will say, so once night 8 comes, he's already chayiv. Now, even though what? You can't offer it until day number 8, but the obligation devolves upon him already on night number 8. Look at Rashi. Nischayiv b'karban, v'afal pi she'in layla roi l'karban alma, afal gav de lo roi l'karban yeshol tashlumin. So I will say, what do you see from here? You see from here that according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you have a situation where a person can't bring a karban, ultimately, again, they're still obligated to make it up. So in this case over here, the Nazir becomes tamei again on night number 8. Rabbi Yochanan says, well, night number 8 comes, you're chayiv in the karban, you can't bring it, but nevertheless, you're chayiv to make it up. So the Gemara is asking a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, because we'll say, what does Rabbi Yochanan say in our case? Rabbi Yochanan says that if you have a guy who can't walk on day number 1, but can walk Baruch Hashem on day number 2, what's his obligation for Chagigah? None at all. Because Rabbi Yochanan will say, since you couldn't bring it on day number 1, you're not chayiv for any tashlumin. But one second, but Rabbi Yochanan just said that the Nazir, who becomes Tamei on night number 8, after he undergoes his second Tara process, will have to bring 2 sets of karbanos. But at night you can't bring the carbon. It's true you can't bring it, but the obligation sits on you, and therefore you're obligated to make it up. So that's a kasha that Rabbi Yochanan holds in our case over here by Chagigah, to which the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Yirmiyah, shiny tuma, the yeshla tashlum pesach sheni. We'll say tuma is different. Tuma is different because we'll say built into the halachos of tuma is the concept of a makeup. Right? We'll say, what's the paradigmatic example of makeup by tuma? Pesach sheni. Right? What does Pesach sheni say? If you're tamei by Pesach rishon, you have a makeup date. So we'll say, so the Gemara essentially saying is it's apples and oranges, right? In other words, it's 2 different cases. You can't compare the case of Chagigah to the case of Tumah, because Tumah by definition has the concept of a makeup built into it. So maske for Papa, Hani Chalaman Damar Pesach Sheni Amud Beis Tashlumin Derishon. So I will say that makes sense according to the opinion that says that Pesach Sheni is indeed a Tashlumin. However, Elaman Da'amar Sheni Regal Bifne Atzmo. I will say, now listen to this. But according to the opinion who says that Pesach Sheni, I will say, is what? Is a Yom Tov unto itself, right? Is its own independent Yom Tov. It's not a Tashlumin for Pesach Rishon. It's just, I will say, the difference is that separate independent Yom Tov is only triggered when? If you didn't have Pesach Rishon, but it's not a Tashlumin, right? So I will say, it's not considered to be a makeup, it's a separate Yom Tov. Now I will say, you say to yourself again, we learn, it's very exciting, we learn this sugya. But remember the nafkamina? We saw in the Gemara says, what's the nafkamina between a Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni? Is Yom Tov b'fnei atzma or Tashlum? Remember the nafkamina? Someone converts, a ger shenis gayer, ben Pesach Rishon the Pesach Sheni. So what's the shaila? Is the convert obligated in Pesach Sheni? So remember the Gemara, what does the Gemara say? If you hold that Pesach Sheni is a Tashlumin, then is the ger chayiv in Pesach Sheni? No, because he wasn't Jewish at Pesach Rishon. But if you hold that it's a Yom Tiv b'fnei atzmo, it's its own Yom Tiv, then einachinami the ger will be chayiv. Elaman damar sheni regel b'fnei atzmo. The Gemara says, "Ma'i kalamei." Allah amar papa, kasav Rabbi Yochanan, laila eino mechusar zman. Rather, I will say the truth is this is a different discussion. Rabbi Yochanan holds that halacha l'maisa, nighttime is not considered to be mechusar zman by karbanos. Right? I will say mechusar zman means lacking time, meaning that a person has not yet arrived at the right time to be chayiv in karbanos. Rabbi Yochanan has a unique position, and he holds nighttime is not considered to be mechusar zman. Even though I can't offer up karbanos at night, it's considered to be as if I'm already chayiv in the karbanos. Therefore, I will say that's why Rabbi Yochanan holds that if the Nazir, right, Nazir becomes tamei, goes through his period of Tara, goes through 7 days. On day number 7, he goes ahead and, we'll say like in a perfect world, day number 7, he goes to the mikvah, has Herav Shemesh, sun goes down, sun comes up on day number 8, what does he do? He offers up his karbanos. Rabbi Yochanan holds that already the night of day 8, night 8, he's already chayiv in karbanos. In other words, even though he can't offer it up, he's already chayiv. Because he's already chayiv, that's what Rabbi Yochanan holds, that if he were to become tamei again that night and have to observe another period of Tara, at the end of the second period of Tara, he'd be obligated to do what? Bring 2 sets of karbanos. One for his first tumah, because he already became chayiv in karbanos that night, and one for his second tumah. But the Gemara effectively says that halacha l'maisa, what Rabbi Yochanan says by Metzora, by the case of tumah, is just a different set of halachos than what Rabbi Yochanan holds by Chagigah. Umiyamar Rabbi Yochanan achi. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say that? Rabbi Yochanan said, Ra'ah achaz balaylu shtayim bayom. Rabbi say, if a person had a re'iyah, right? This is talking about a man who had an emission. 1 emission at night and 2 by day, maybe. Then you bring a carbon. Rabbi say, remember again, person has 3 emissions, he becomes a zav gadol, right? He becomes a right. Remember again, so 2 emissions, shiva nekim, 7 clean days, right? 3 emissions ultimately has to bring a carbon. So Rabbi Yochanan says, if there was 1 re'iyah at night and 2 re'iyos by day, maybe shtayim balayla va'achaz bayom. But if he had 2 re'iyos at night and 1 by day, eino maybe. And I will say, what's the logic? The logic is because halacha l'maisa, the tumah began at night. And And if Rabbi Yochanan really hold that Allah Laila is not considered the Mechusar Zman, as we just said, Afilu shtayim balayda va'achas bayom, maybe, then even if there are 2 re'iyos by night and 1 by day, should be chayiv in carbon. So you're right. Ki ka'amar Rabbi Yochanan, divrei Omer Laila Mechusar Zman. So Rabbi Yochanan say, ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan is only espousing his position, according to the one who says that Laila is Mechusar Zman. The divrei ha'omer, the divrei ha'omer pshita. That's obvious, according to the opinion of Laila is Mechusar Zman. That's obvious. Shtayim bayom va'achas balayla. It's trichalei. I need the case of where there are 2 re'iyos by day, 1 re'iyah by night. Sagadai tchamina, because you might have thought kidas kapsa to Rav Shisha Bar Dravidi, like the Shaila like Rav Shisha Bar Dravidi. This is quoting a separate sugya. Kamashman kid Rav Yosef. Therefore, the Gemara says no. We accept the refutation of Rav Yosef as we saw before in the previous sugya. Good, Rabbi say. So bottom line, halacha lemaisa. So Rabbi say, how do we paskin in this particular case? Halacha lemaisa, we actually do paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. Namely, that we view the halachos of Chagigah as everything is a tashlumin derishon. The subsequent days of Yom Tov are considered to be a makeup for day number 1, which means what? If halacha lemaisa, I was not obligated on day number 1, then ultimately again, then I am exempt for the rest of Yom Tov. Once you are exempt on day 1, by definition, you are exempt for the rest of them. We pass like Rabbi Yochanan, not like Rabbi Oshia. Incredible. So we'll say, let's go back. There's a very beautiful Gemara ahead of us now. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, if you go through Yom Tov and you did not offer up the Chagigah, you're not obligated to make it up. So Amrli bar Hei lehillel. So we'll say, bar Hei said to Hillel, Hai lihimanos mi baile. So we'll say, it's interesting. The wording of the pasuk doesn't read well. So Shalom Malach says, "V'chesron lo yuchal lihimanos." That chesron means that which is lacking. That which is lacking cannot be counted. So Bar Hei says to Hillel, it shouldn't say that which is lacking cannot be counted. It should say that which is lacking cannot be what? Filled in. Right? In other words, we'll say the opposite of chaser is not maneh. The opposite of chaser is male, right? Something is missing or it's full, right? It's empty or it's full. So it's good shaila. So why doesn't it say lihimalos? So we'll say, listen to this. To which Hillel responded, Ella, what is he referring to? We'll say, this is so profound. Rather, the Gemara says, Zeh shemanu chaverav lidvar mitzvah b'hulo nimna imanu. What are we talking about? We're talking about a guy whose friends, right? Whose friends ultimately, again, got together to do a mitzvah, but he didn't join them. That's what it means. V'chesron lo yuchal lihimanos. He wasn't counted amongst his friends, right? His friends were ready to do a mitzvah, right? So he has a good chaver, they're ready to do something positive. He said, no, I'm too busy, right? Can't do it right now. So he missed out on an opportunity to perform a chesed, the chesed or mitzvah. The chesron lo yuchal lihimanos. If you're not counted with the chevra initially, then unfortunately, again, even if you choose to be counted later on, you often can't be counted. Taina Rachabais that supports this also is incredible. Muvas lo yuchal liskon. Something that is bent cannot be fixed. What does that refer to? Zeh shebital kriyash shema shel shachris or kriyash shema shel arvis. This is a person who intentionally didn't say Shema in the morning, didn't say Shema in the evening. Oh, shebital tefillah shel shachris or tefillah shel arvis, or purposely didn't daven. So I'll say, if I purposely don't say Shema, I purposely don't say Shema, you can't make that up. So remember again, if I accidentally miss davening, there's a makeup. But let me say, if I intentionally miss out, that's it. I'll say an incredibly profound yisod. There are certain things where if you miss it, you miss it. If the ship sails, the ship sails. There's no makeup. There's absolutely no makeup. So the Gemara says, Zeh shamanu v'chesron lo yuchal lihimanos. What does it mean? That which is absent or that which is missing cannot be counted. So I'll say that's ultimately, what does that refer to? Zeh shenimnu chaver l'dvar mitzvah v'hulo nimna imayim. That refers to someone whose friends got together to do a mitzvah, but he was not counted among them. I will say such an incredible yisod. When your friends, when your community is doing something positive and you choose to absent yourself from that, chesron lo yuchal lihimanos. Then sometimes when I wake up and I decide, hey, I'd love to be part of that, sometimes the ship has already sailed. So incredible. Amrli bar Hei lehillel, mai dichsiv, v'shavtem ureisem bein tzadik l'rasha, bein obed elokim la'asher lo avdu. So we'll say, so bar Hei once again says to Hillel, What's the meaning in the pasuk when it says "V'shavtem u'reisim"? You will see and you will return and you will see the difference between tzaddik and a rasha, righteous person and a wicked person. Bein oved Elokim la'asher lo avdo, between a person who serves God and doesn't serve God. So Barhei says, Tila, understand, isn't the pasuk repetitive? Hainu tzaddik, hainu oved Elokim, hainu rasha, hainu asher lo avdo. I will say, isn't a tzaddik the same thing as a person who serves Hashem, right? And the rasha is the same thing as a person who doesn't serve Hashem. In other words, isn't the pasuk repetitive? I will say, listen to this answer. Hillel says, no. The truth is, you're right. Avdo v'lo avdo. Right? A person who serves Hashem doesn't serve Hashem. They're really both tzadikim gemurim. So I'll say, interesting. Both refer to the tzadikim gemurim. So we'll say, what's your between person who serves Hashem and doesn't serve Hashem? They're both tzadikim. Ve'eno domesh shona pirko mea upamim l'shona pirko mea ve'echad. I will say, what's yours between the two? You can't compare a person who reviews his learning 100 times to a person who reviews his learning 101 times. So what Hillel answers is, the Oved Hashem is the person who reviews his learning 101 times. The person who doesn't serve Hashem, quote unquote, as much, is the person who only reviews 100 times. So I will say, what is Hillel ultimately saying? You could be a tzaddik, but I will say, what really makes a person an Oved Hashem? Going the extra mile. Going the extra mile. See, I both say, a tzaddik is someone this goes back to tzidkas tzaddik, by the way. A tzaddik goes back to what's expected of him. It's great, I review my learning. Review my learning is a metaphor. It doesn't have to be literal. I review my learning 100 times. We'll say, but what's an Oved Hashem? What's someone ultimately, again, who truly serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Say, that's the person who pushes himself more. That's the person who exceeds expectations. That's the person who doesn't just do that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands me, but I push myself to do more. I push myself to be more. Amrlei umishum chad zimna kari la avdu. And I will say, but because of one time, so Barhei was bothered by this, because the tzaddik doesn't push himself to review the extra time, he's called someone who doesn't serve Hashem. So I will say, Hill gives a great answer. Amrlei in. Say ulamadni shuk shel chamarin asara parsi bezuza chad asar parsi betrei zuzi. I will say, so he gives a great example. I'll contemporize it a little bit. Right? It's like going in a taxi. I will say, it's an interesting thing, right? You're in that taxi, you're watching the meter, and something amazing happens, right? There's that moment where the fare goes up because ultimately, again, you've traveled that extra mile, right? So you're looking at the fare, you're like, pretty sure we're going to get there before it changes, right? And it's amazing. For the extra moment that I'm in the taxi, it's another $5, right? But it was an extra 5 seconds. How is 5 seconds worth $5? Well, say, isn't it incredible that at a certain point in time, that extra little bit moves the needle in such a significant way? In other words, ruchnius is not proportional. Spirituality is not proportional. So to use the metaphor over here, the reviewing 101 times versus 100 times is not just the pshat that I reviewed one extra time. Going the extra mile, reviewing that one extra time is like the meter, just simply switching over. The tire just moved a little bit, but one little movement of the tire, it's another $5. But it moved this much. Literally again, another $5. That I was like, putting in the extra effort by ruchnius yields a disproportionate, in a positive way, a disproportionately positive result. We'll say, isn't it the incredible yesod? So I do what's expected to me, that's incredible. I push myself further. It's not just the pshat that I get a little bit more ruchnius because I invested myself just a bit more. The little bit more investment, the little bit more of pushing myself yields a disproportionate result in my ruchnius, to the point that ultimately, again, the person who exerts the extra effort, that person is called the real Oved Hashem. And when compared to the person who's still a tzaddik, but didn't exert the disproportionate effort, he's called Asher Lo Avdu, who didn't serve Hashem. It's incredible. So the Gemara says, Amrle Eliyahu lebar hey, Amrle Rabbi Lazar, my dichsiv, hinei tzifarticha v'lo bekaseh. So it says incredible. With this, we'll have to stop. Eliyahu Hanavi was talking to Bar Hey. We'll say, isn't it incredible when the Gemara just says this like matter of fact? Eliyahu Hanavi was talking to Bar Hey. Okay. But Amar Rabbi Lazar said it wasn't Bar Hey, it was Rabbi Lazar. What's the meaning of the pasuk? Hine tzifarticha v'lo b'kasef. I have forged you, right? I have forged you, but not with money. Becharticha bekar oni. I have literally chosen you, bekar, in the cauldron of poverty. Melamed shechazar HaKadosh Baruch Hu al kol midos tovos litin liYisrael. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked at all the various midos to give to Eretz Yisrael, to give to Klal Yisrael. V'lo matza ela anios. And the best midah he found was the midah of poverty. Amar Shmuel v'tim Rav Yosef Hanu Darmi Inshi Ya'ar Aniyusa Liyudai Ki Barza Sumka Lususe Chivra. But says Rav Yosef, this is what people say when they mean that poverty is as good for Klal Yisrael as a red ribbon is for a white horse. We'll have to stop here for today. I'm going to record the rest of the Daf Yomi Hashem to the bottom today. Be ma'ayin into this a little bit because incredible Gemaras. We'll say shkoyach on another incredible week of learning. Baruch Hashem. Mamish should be zochet to many more weeks like this.